If there's one trend we've seen at Donors Trust over the past few years is that more and more donors are interested in putting their support behind things in the states, a little more local for their giving. And that's not a surprise. You can have a lot of impact at the state level. You can move the needle and you can actually see the needle moved. It's accessible and there's a terrific ecosystem of really great free market think tanks all across the country in every state, some stronger than others, but all working towards ideas that we believe in. One state that has been particularly blessed and has worked really hard to create not just a terrific think tank, but a whole web of great organizations advancing the ideas that people who listen to this podcast care about is in Pennsylvania. The Commonwealth Foundation is among the strongest and most influential of the state free market think tanks in the state policy network, and has been at it for almost 40 years and pumping out smart policy ideas to advance prosperity in a state that's not, frankly, always friendly to those ideas. And it has been complemented by a whole menagerie of additional organizations doing litigation, pushing back on unions, and engaging in the political side of things with a C6 and with a PAC. And we'll get into some of that in a little bit. So today we're going to look at Pennsylvania as a case study of what change can look like, what donors can make possible when they get excited about really driving market ideas in a state. We'll talk about what does it take to be a battleground state in the battle of ideas and how can people invest towards that goal. Matt Brouillette runs the Commonwealth Partners, which is a 501c6 organization in Pennsylvania. He formerly ran the 501c3 think tank, Commonwealth Foundation, and has a new book coming out. It's called You Gotta Win Pennsylvania, which is pretty straightforward in telling its thesis that Pennsylvania is a really important state and can be a model for creating change elsewhere. Matt, great to see you.
Hey, great to be with you, Peter. Thanks for having me on.
So the first sentence in your book is a little unexpected to me. You start the book with this sentence, quote, "This is the story of entrepreneurs." End quote. So that's not necessarily where I expected a book that's from the title seemingly about politics. Maybe this is a book about politicians. This is a book about activists. This is a book about citizens because we care about citizens. Why entrepreneurs?
Well, it's quite simple. For me, as a former high school and middle school history teacher, I love talking about the founding of our country because we're so unique in the history of mankind, even today, where we represent 5% of the world's population. But frankly, the other 95% of the world depends on America remaining America. And as a history teacher, I love talking about the founding of this country and the men who signed their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor to create something that, frankly, nobody could have ever imagined could be created. And in doing so, leaving what was then the world's greatest power. So these men were truly entrepreneurs in a political sense and even in the literal sense in businesses. And so it was entrepreneurs who founded and ultimately built this great country. And the thesis of my book and everything that I talk about, Peter, is that I believe it will be entrepreneurs that ultimately save America, that entrepreneurs need to step up in the same way that they did in the founding of this country, saving it. And so to me, entrepreneurs are the keystone, and I'll steal that from Pennsylvania here, are the keystone to keeping America, America.
And you're really defining entrepreneurs, I guess, broadly, right? Not just money entrepreneurs, not just people who build things and earn capital from it, but those social entrepreneurs, those idea entrepreneurs, people who are essentially just willing to put their life, ideas, fortunes on the line to move the ball forward. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And in my book, I highlight education entrepreneurs, people that think, hey, there's a better way that we can educate kids that are from low income, trapped in schools that don't work for them, and coming up with ideas on how to do that, breaking the molds. And so throughout the book, I talk about these kinds of entrepreneurs that were willing to take risks, not knowing the outcome. But we need more of that. We can't just play it safe anymore. And I believe that it's entrepreneurs throughout, whether it's in the nonprofit world, obviously the for-profit world, that they're the ones that are going to determine whether America remains America. And so I wanted to highlight the role that they've played, certainly in Pennsylvania, the fifth largest state, biggest swing state in the country, how entrepreneurs in Pennsylvania have stopped Pennsylvania from becoming blue and are fighting today to help Pennsylvania become a leader in the Northeast and in the country once again.
Yeah, maybe that phrase, "There is a better way," is kind of the definitional call for the entrepreneur. Everything you said there, I think, kind of feeds into my next question. So, turning to Pennsylvania, turning to Commonwealth Foundation, which you ran for many years until 2016. You took it over in 2002, and I believe at the time there were just three staff, presumably including you,
Yeah, right.
and three real donors to it, which is not a lot of donors. It's not a lot of staff for a think tank, particularly given how significant you've become. I'm curious, just from the donor psychology, what did they see that led them to take kind of such a risky bet and had been taking such a risky bet in a hard state to build this think tank?
Yeah, so when I came to Commonwealth Foundation in '02, I had left the Mackinac Center where I was the director of education policy. I had more staff and a bigger budget just in my education department than I had at Commonwealth Foundation. So I figured I couldn't screw this thing up. I could only go up from there. Um, and at the same time, Peter, some of those donors were like, "Who is this French guy coming in from Michigan who grew up in San Diego? Can we, empower him and trust him to do something with Commonwealth Foundation?" Well, fortunately, they did so and was able to build the Commonwealth Foundation into a from a sleepy think tank into one that was having an impact in state politics. And while I, recognize the importance of a think tank, and the Commonwealth Foundation is just critical for Pennsylvania's policy direction. While it's important, it's not sufficient. And in 2016, my then board chairman at Commonwealth Foundation and I started Commonwealth Partners Chamber of Entrepreneurs. And the reason we did that was that we recognized that if we wanted to see good policy get enacted, we were going to have better politicians. And that required us to get engaged in politics because we don't do things politically just to have someone with, say, an R after their name. Our objective is to actually achieve positive policy outcomes, rescue kids from crummy schools, improve our business climate, have things that really truly help people live the lives that they want to pursue and the dreams that they want to pursue. And so we've taken a holistic approach that looks at policy as our primary objective, but recognizing that politics, that we've got to be engaged there if we want to have better politicians carrying good policy across the finish line. And so that's how we transformed ourselves and have grown into what we call a durable freedom infrastructure, something that is a holistic approach to advancing political and policy change for the good of the people of Pennsylvania.
Did that scare the donor community, or even kind of broadly speaking, when you started this C6 and essentially said, "We think we want to get involved in politics"? I feel like a lot of C3 kind of foundational think
Yeah.
tanky donors may be like, "Oh, well, politics is the dirty stuff. We don't want to touch that."
Certainly, and frankly, that's why I got into the think tank world. I'd done some work on a U.S. Senate campaign in California when Republicans could actually win. This was back in the '90s, and I realized I really liked the policy side of things, and so I got into the think tank world. My first job was at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy in Michigan, and I had a passion for good public policy. Um, and so a lot of the donors, of course, that were with us at Commonwealth Foundation, and they recognized the importance of good policy. And many of them, frankly, as you said, were kind of politics was icky, was dirty. And so this was a real risk. And so when I went home and told my wife and our four young kids at the time that, hey, I was going to leave Commonwealth Foundation to do more political work with the creation of Commonwealth Partners, it was indeed a risk because I didn't know if the many donors that we had at Commonwealth Foundation would transition into the political world. Had a number of donors who believed in us. And frankly, we've helped a lot of people to recognize that you need to have that vice, that politics and the policy. And so a lot of our donors are investing across the board. And Peter, it was a little hard for my board who thought, boy, you're going to cannibalize the donors at Commonwealth Foundation for Commonwealth Partners. But what we've seen is that the pie has grown. And when people see effectiveness and success and the things that we've accomplished, that has generated even greater investment that people are investing all across their board. They're using their donor advised funds to invest in Commonwealth Foundation and then writing political checks to help Commonwealth Partners get the right people in so that they will then do the right things.
Yeah, I think a lot of fundraisers, a lot of board leaders don't necessarily realize that the donors are thinking in different buckets. It's not all just one pot of money in their head. There's their C3 bucket, there's their hospital C3 bucket, and their policy C3
Right.
bucket, and then the political bucket can be a whole different thing. And I think
Well,
you're
it
and it
absolutely
probably
is.
opens up to new donors too.
No doubt, no doubt. But something that you said at the beginning of the podcast here, Peter, I think is really important. Um, State level politics is generally neglected by national donors, people that really care about America. Um, they might be paying attention to what's happening directly in their backyard and certainly what goes on in Washington, D.C. The challenge that I've seen in my 30 years involved in the state movement is that a lot of national donors don't recognize, frankly, what the left has recognized for a number of decades, that if you can control things at the state level, you will then control things at the national level. And that's what's been happening across this country is that progressive investors have been putting their money at state level infrastructure development. It's been through C3s and C4s and political action. And that's how they are capturing states and essentially flipping things nationally. We go back to Colorado in the 2000s. It was a solid red state, but four billionaire progressives decided to retake Colorado's politics, and ever since then, it's a deep blue state. In fact, one of those billionaires is now the governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, and that has been a strategy that the left is deploying all across the country, and especially right here in Pennsylvania, where our current governor, he receives more than half of his money from outside of Pennsylvania. Our state elections are being predominantly funded by national dollars, money flowing from George Soros, Michael Bloomberg, Steven Spielberg, you name it, that list of progressive donors, they are recognizing that if we can capture the state, we can control the nation.
There's a lot of talk often that the left just has more money, they pour more money in, they out of state money goes into smaller states or just key strategic states, and the right just plays completely differently. The conservative side just doesn't play
Mhm.
that way. But we like to believe, we tell ourselves, well, but we have outsized impact with the money that we do. True or false? Do you think that narrative is right?
Well, look, we're very competitive at national races. I mean, we had a huge U.S. Senate race here in 2024 in Pennsylvania. Dave McCormick being the only Republican to beat a sitting Democrat in one of the battleground states, and so we saw sufficient money coming into Pennsylvania from outside of Pennsylvania. But it is where we are unmatched at the local level. In state elections, we are not seeing that same level of understanding from conservatives on the right that the left does. And so that's what's a real threat in states like Pennsylvania and the other battleground states, whether it's Michigan or Wisconsin or North Carolina, Arizona. The left is heavily investing. They're pooling their money nationally at these state level elections because they know if they capture the House, the Senate, the governor, and the courts, they can control congressional district lines, as we're seeing in Virginia, where they're threatening to redraw lines. So it'd be a 10-1 Democrat majority. So when they capture things at the state level, that's how they then advance their issues at the national level. This is where conservatives on the right do not understand this the way that progressives on the left have. And I think that that's one of the greatest threats that we're seeing in our key swing states in America today.
How does the the relationship, which I know is, to stipulate 501(c)(6), 501(c)(3), different boards, different organizations, very different missions to a certain extent, and yet, just like we hope any think tank has influence over the politicians, the leaders, the grass tops with the ideas it's putting out, it's certainly informing some of the things you're working about. How does the kind of agenda, the messages of the C3 inform some of the work you do?
Yeah, we are absolutely synergistic in that regard because the policy agenda of and the principles of the Commonwealth Foundation are the ones that I share at Commonwealth Partners. And what we've done, as you noted, we are completely separate entities, have separate boards. We draw bright lines between our organizations to be in compliance, but that doesn't prevent us from having coordination. And so frequently what happens is I'll give you an example of how we engage in the political sphere. So we will identify a candidate or will come alongside a candidate for office, and Commonwealth Foundation will provide policy briefings for anybody, whether you're Democrat or Republican, but we make sure all of our folks get a download of what's important, what's happening in our state legislature, the top policy issues, and certainly provide them through Commonwealth Foundation the talking points on the hot issues of the day. Then, once we are successful in helping get them into office, Commonwealth Foundation then comes alongside them. They have a full government affairs team spending time up on the Capitol Hill, in the district, in our offices. And so they surround them with good people. And, relationships matter. And Commonwealth Foundation builds those relationships with the right people, and they help them do the right thing once they're in office. So it's really, I keep going back to this holistic approach, and I think it is very unique in states in that we not only do the politics, but we work on the policy. Whereas, a traditional campaign consultant, they're only, interested in getting somebody across the goal line on, the first Tuesday in November, and then really don't care what they do once they're in office. We care very much. And that's what really drives us is the accountability that we're able to bring. And it's why we've been able to move issues that were not even on the radar in Pennsylvania to being the top priorities of our elected officials in Pennsylvania. So this approach is one that, look, we'd love to see more states doing this. Again, I think tanks are critically important, but I don't think they're sufficient if our end goal is to see good public policy that helps kids, that improves business climates. And so we'd like to see this model, exported. And we've been doing that with a lot of states, talking to them of how we've done this, because we're entrepreneurial. We've lost things, we've done things incorrectly, but we're here to try to make this work so that we can save America.
Well, it's great, and yeah, I think it is a very exportable model. I'm sure we all like to believe our states are unique and different, but sometimes, well, if it works, it works. And
Yeah.
what is the biggest obstacle to replication of what you're doing in other states? Is it dollars? Is it the will? Is it weird different election structures? What is it?
Well, it's all those things, and you're exactly right. There are, it's not a plug and play. You can't just take what we're doing in Pennsylvania and put it in Virginia or in any of the other states. And so everybody's going to have to be entrepreneurial and unique in how they deploy this. And frankly, we made that mistake back, way back 15 years ago, that we watched what Scott Walker had done in Wisconsin, in 2011, and we saw a lot of the infrastructure that was built in Wisconsin to effectuate that change. And we thought, well, then let's just replicate exactly what Wisconsin did. And we went about we went about doing that, but then quickly realized, what, this isn't exactly the same. And so I don't know what version we're on today, whether it's 7 or 11 or something like that. But frankly, that's what every entrepreneur has to do is they run into a roadblock and then they figure out, okay, how do we do this better? And so for us, frankly, when we started Commonwealth Partners, we thought we were only going to spend money through independent expenditures, meaning using our members' dollars and deploying on behalf of a candidate. Well, what we found is that many of our members were more than willing to write personal checks, political action dollars. And the difference between independent expenditures and PAC dollars is significant. One, you can coordinate with the candidates, and that has allowed us to work directly with candidates. And two, it actually maximizes your dollars because frequently independent expenditures have to pay higher rates for media purchases than do candidates. And then it also, the final benefit is that when we come alongside with political action dollars, that really creates a partnership and a friendship with the people who are in office. And in politics, everything revolves around those relationships, and that really helps us to build those relationships. Um, what I like to say is, with the people we help elect, we really don't have to hold their hands or twist their arms to do the right thing, but it's great to be in close proximity with them when difficult issues are coming up or we need them to stand strong against special interest. And because of the political action dollars we can bring to some of these fights, that has really empowered us to see our policy issues become the priority issues of our elected leaders.
Yeah, and to me, that's always one of the should be the priority of any state think tank is to be kind of setting the agenda, the tone of what people are discussing, what candidates are discussing, even from a C3 perspective, kind of writing the script of this is the important issue, and if you're not responding to it, then you're out of step and you're out of.
No doubt. And when Charles Mitchell, my partner, and I were figuring out, okay, we need to have a political arm, we actually thought, well, let's find somebody else that can do this. Or is there an existing entity that can do this? And as we looked around, we didn't find that. And so that was why I had to leave Commonwealth Foundation to create this new entity. But in some states, there may be some political players that already share your values and can come alongside to work with a think tank. So that's where there is no one size fits all approach to this. But I do think that every state needs to think about how are we going to effectuate political and policy change, and doing both of them is critical for it.
So one thing you say in your book, paraphrasing, I can't remember the exact quote, but is essentially red doesn't mean conservative, right? That just because they have a Republican behind their name doesn't mean they actually believe in free markets and prosperity and the things that one might think of as a conservative free market
Yeah.
approach. I'm curious how that has played out, both from having to end up pushing back against Republicans, but also does that open the door when you're thinking in that mindset to working with people with a D behind their name?
Well, we have. We have, in fact, worked with people with a D behind their name, especially when it's been the opportunity to expand school choice, which we've done a lot of that in Pennsylvania, despite having hostile governors. And so we've seen our school choice expand. But when I came in 2002, Peter, I was frankly not welcome in a lot of Republican leadership offices because the things that we stood for were not wasn't the Republican agenda. Remember back then, our Republican highest elected official was Arlen Specter. So that gives you an idea, at least for your older viewers and listeners, understand what that means. We had lots of Republicans who didn't behave like Republicans. But what has happened is that because of our influence through Commonwealth Foundation and then Commonwealth Partners politically, um, Pennsylvania Republicans now truly share our values. It's not that milk toast republicanism of Arlen Specter, but they are championing the issues that we as free market champions that they've embraced them, and the Republican Party in Pennsylvania shares our policy priorities that they didn't used to share before.
That's great. And of course we did a whole 11-part series on how the right is shuffled around a little bit and things look a little bit different. Some of the lanes are different. Are you able to work across all lanes of the right? Maybe not the ones that are just pro big government, but are you finding any in this weird political climate we're in? Is it harder, easier?
Well, it's actually gotten a lot easier where we used to have a lot of outliers. Those numbers have dwindled in our state legislature. And frankly, that's part of why we've got some razor thin majorities and razor thin minority in our state house. The Democrats have a 102, 101 majority in our state house right now. So razor thin there. But when we used to have a dozen Republicans who didn't toe the line, say on school choice, now there might be one or two. And so what's happened is I think that Republicans have certainly embraced a free market agenda in Pennsylvania, and we're able to get some Democrats from time to time on these issues. But frankly, it's really been the polarization that we've seen probably all across the country. I think has made it much more difficult for a lot of good bipartisan policy making to actually see the light of day of late because it's frustrating for those of us who are here for good policy, and the politics tends to get in the way, sadly.
I want to go back to kind of the C3 world a little bit and just the entrepreneurialism of Commonwealth Inc., if you will, because you've obviously launched Commonwealth Partners as a C6 and PAC, but there are other organizations that have spun out of Commonwealth Foundation. Talk to us about those and why.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I was running Commonwealth Foundation from '02 until 16, in that interim, and I noted how we watched what Scott Walker did in Wisconsin in after his election in 2010 and what was going on in 2011. And what that really did for us in Pennsylvania was we have a very powerful union special interest in Pennsylvania. Both the public and private sector unions are very powerful politically. And most of the conventional wisdom was that you can't take them on, they are dominant. When we watched what Scott Walker did in Wisconsin, that really gave us a lot of hope. And we thought, you know what? If Wisconsin can take on the public sector unions, we can too in Pennsylvania. And so really Commonwealth Foundation shifted its focus. And what I've always said is that, look, when I had to make decisions at the foundation, it was never choosing between, good and bad public policy or things that we wanted to work on. I didn't have to choose, is really choosing between good, better, and best. And what we focused on is that if we want to tackle the best things, we're going to have to remove the impediment of the public sector unions. And the public sector unions, we recognize not only just on education, say the teacher unions, but on everything. They opposed us, whether it was reducing our taxes or reducing regulation, or you talk about healthcare, you talk about infrastructure. The public sector unions were on the wrong side on every issue that we tackled. And so for us, we said, we need to stop flailing at the branches and tackling every single issue. And we need to strike the root of the problem, and that's public sector unions. And so in 2014, we helped launch the Fairness Center, which is a public interest law firm that is solely dedicated to representing public employees against unions that have abused their power. And the Fairness Center, currently run by Nathan McGrath, they have, I believe, over 90 live cases all across the country now, representing public employees against public sector unions. They've deprived the public sector unions of tens of millions of dollars and freed many, many people from abusive powers of the public sector unions. And so for us, that was a key part, using litigation to help level the playing field. And they've been doing so since 2014, over 10 years now. And so then it
And
was
it's
in,
worth
yeah,
noting too that that's an organization, as you say, that works nationally. That's actually something that other think tanks could tap into in terms of a resource. They don't necessarily per se need to rebuild that's already there.
correct, correct. And they're eager to work with partners. And that's how they've expanded, is that our think tank partners in those states have brought Fairness Center in when they've had an issue. I know one case that they're working on right now is in New Jersey, where the former teacher union president illegally used teacher union dues to support his campaign for governor. And so the Fairness Center is involved in that. And there's going to be a lot more coming out on that as the litigation goes forward. But that's how we've said, look, we're about America. And of course, Pennsylvania is important to us. And I think it's, as the fifth largest state, an important state. But we fight for freedom everywhere that we can. And so the Fairness Center is taking that to the courts and in the courtroom to fight for freedom against those who really stand against us at every level of government. And that's the public sector unions.
And there's also Americans for Fair Treatment, which is doing work in the union sector, and then Black Pastors for Education. I don't know that
Yes.
at least it's. I know you work very closely with them. It's just a lot of groups that
Yeah.
you all are really close to, which I think is phenomenal.
Well, that's one of the wonderful things is that when you're in this sphere and engage with other entrepreneurs, and you mentioned Black Pastors United for Education, Pastor Joshua Robertson has become a great friend, and I met him just through a cold call. I was on a board called the Joshua Group that we serve Harrisburg City kids to escape our crummy public schools that are often violent. We provide about 180 scholarships for kids to get out of the Harrisburg city schools. And the ministry that I was working with, we needed some after school space for our kids. And the executive director said, Matt, why don't you call this guy? He's a pastor right around the corner. I hear he's a cool dude. And so I just cold called Pastor Robertson, and we hit it off right away. Because when I described what we're trying to do for kids, he says, Matt, these kids are like me. That's who I was when I was young. And he ended up going to college because without the ability to read past the second grade, and ended up failing out. And the only reason he was matriculated was because he was a good athlete, and he ended up losing 25 Division I football scholarships, but ended up learning to read from a pastor who came alongside him, and obviously that inspired Pastor Josh to get into the ministry. And so Black Pastors United has only formed because Josh has said, "Look, I want to rescue as many kids as I can." Starting in his community, but now he's going all across the country. And this is how we've just seen that entrepreneurial drive of people to create new things that help others. And so we're just very proud of the things that people have gone off to do, whether it's the Fairness Center with Nathan McGrath as the litigation firm, or Pastor Joshua doing Black Pastors United, advocating for kids and for school choice all across this country.
So hopefully, some folks are listening here and they're saying, "Gosh, I want to see more of this in my state. We got to Pennsylvania sure is thinking big. We need to think big." What what advice do you have for those donors? How can they what are the questions they should be asking in their own state? Are there things that they need to rethink in their own giving to make this possible? What are the questions?
No doubt. I mean, that's where I so appreciate and am blessed to interact with entrepreneurs who have allowed us to take risks. Not everything we've done has been successful. And so having board members of your organizations that say, let's think outside the box. Let's think big. And we know we're not going to be successful in all this. So I think it takes that leadership of boards to drive that, to bring in the right people, to have the leaders that think entrepreneurially and are empowered to fail so that they can learn from those mistakes. I mean, I think that that's one of the things that I like to do is to go into states that are looking at doing things similar to us, to say, look, this is what we did. This utterly failed. So avoid that pitfall. And we come alongside whoever is looking for help to be able to craft the kind of infrastructure that I think is necessary for political and policy change. Because I believe that if we do this well at the state level, that's how we impact things at the national level. It's not the other way around. And so I think it's just critical that organizations all across our country that are fighting for freedom, that they think about, all right, what are we missing? What's the piece of the puzzle? Is it a litigation arm? Is it a media arm? What is it that we need to bring into this fight for freedom? And go out and do it. Take the risk, take the jump, because it's worth it.
Well, as I said, you start the book talking about entrepreneurs, and I think there's a lot of people who don't necessarily think about themselves as entrepreneurs, but do have big ideas, do have ambitions, and can do that through their dollars, through their time, through their gifts, and they should go do it because there's a lot of country to save. So, Matt Brouillette, thank
No
you so
doubt.
much for joining us and sharing all this with us. It's great.
Thank you, Peter. Enjoyed being with you.
Well, in case it wasn't obvious, I've been impressed with what Matt and Charles and others are doing in Pennsylvania for a long time. They have really built a terrific blueprint for other states to follow in terms of not just creating good policies, not just disseminating good policies, but holding politicians to the fire, holding unions accountable, and helping citizens really understand what these ideas really mean. It's a phenomenal case study, and as we heard Matt say, it's replicable. It can be done in your state as well, uh, by entrepreneurs. And maybe you are one of them by listening to this. I hope you think of yourself as an entrepreneur. We need everyone who cares about these ideas to think bigger and to give in the way they can, whether that's with their time, their talents, their financial resources, but to be entrepreneurial and saying these ideas matter. We view the world as able to be better. We view our state as able to be better, and helping everyone to live stronger lives, more free, more prosperous lives, and commit to doing it. Go do it. It's important. Well, check the show notes for all of the organizations that we mentioned here in the conversation. Links to those, so you can find out more, and so you can go find Matt's new book. You Gotta Win Pennsylvania, which comes out very soon on Monday, April 6th, 2026. So you don't want to miss that. It's good. And if you think states are an important catalyst for change, then donate to your local think tank. And if you need help identifying a think tank or figuring out which one is a very good fit with your giving and you're already working with the Donors Trust, let's have a conversation. We can have a chat about how that fits into your strategy. And if you aren't already working with Donors Trust, and if you don't already have a donor advised fund here, well, get started. Go to donorstrust.org, see how it works, kick the tires a little bit, reach out to us, and let's figure out how we can be helpful to you in simplifying your giving, maximizing your tax deduction, giving you a little more flexibility, and also giving you a team that knows this world and can help you maximize the impact of your charitable giving, because that is always the goal. Well, I appreciate you listening in. Rate the show if you would, help other people find it, refer it to a friend. And above all, thank you for being a giver. We'll talk more soon.